My name is Ryan Herman, and I'm the editor of CA Magazine, and welcome to this webinar on the power of using Xero for accounts production and tax. Now, pretty much every accounting practice is always looking to improve efficiency, which in turn can free up valuable time to grow the business or simply achieve a better work-life balance. We hope that following this webinar, you will come away with plenty of food for thought around this area, along with how using Xero tax can streamline your practice efficiencies. Now, the person doing most of the talking today is Sam C., who is the education specialist at Xero. And Sam previously worked in managed accounting and software migration for 5 years before moving to Xero in 2018. He now delivers compliance and tax-based education to accountants and bookkeepers, ensuring they have the most up-to-date knowledge of the latest legislation and understand how Xero helps with compliance and practice efficiency. Now, among other things, Sam will be giving you a demo this afternoon, but I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, other than to say, please do use this opportunity to put any questions you may have to Sam at any point, and he will answer them following the end of his presentation. So without further ado, over to you, Sam.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that introduction there, Ryan. And just as Ryan said, my name is Sam. I'm part of the education team here at Xero. And I do have quite a long background now in both accounts finance with qualifications and of course working at Xero for so long and working with our product. But the thing that I most enjoy is I have this real privilege to be able to actually do a lot of sessions like this, both in person, on events like this hosted, and also even our own Xero hosted ones. And it means I get to really interact with our accountants and bookkeepers, any of our end users as well. And it is that real privilege to be able to just chat to them, communicate them, and really start to build that conversation and help out with anything I can do on the Xero basis. But what I'm going to go through today is I am going to go through a session specifically on one of our products called Xero Tax, and that's our end-to-end accounts creation and compliance solution. So what I'll do now then is I will hop off the camera, share my screen, and just get right down to it. Okay, so just like I said, thanks for coming along and thanks for giving me the opportunity just to sit and chat with you. So we're going to go through the power of using Xero for accounts production and tax. So just a quick run through of what we're going to be looking at. We're going to start off and talk about what Xero Tax is, how we can then use it for those company accounts and the tax returns. I'm going to take a look at personal tax and the self-assessments, and we'll even touch on our sole trader accounts production. And then the last thing is I'll wrap up and just suggest some next steps that you can take if you've enjoyed looking at the product so far. So to start off with, we all know that January especially can be quite a busy time for accountants and bookkeepers when you've got all those self-assessment filing deadlines in, you've got the annual accounts deadline for quite a lot of companies. And as we call it, that tax season can be quite a manic time, and it's often filled with those long working hours and those tight deadlines. Looking forward into the future, we're only likely to see that the demands on accountants and bookkeepers will increase. And so this is where both your software and your software providers can offer solutions and maybe even begin to help you streamline all of your end of year accounts and some of that tax season. So Xero Tax is a cloud-based accounts production and tax filing solution. And it's available at no extra cost exclusively to accountants and bookkeepers who are part of the Xero UK partner program. Our vision is to provide our accounting partners with a complete end-to-end cloud compliance solution, one that takes information from Xero's bookkeeping product and helps you easily produce the accounts to file the corporation tax and the personal tax returns. Data flows automatically from your client's books in Xero, the accounts, and then into their tax return, helping to begin to streamline that workflow. And then within Xero, there's a huge level of flexibility that allows you to use personal tax for your non-Xero clients. And then without some of that data entry, there's less risk of manual errors and a huge amount of time saved from keying in those figures. And to be able to do a lot of this, Xero Tax had to be deeply embedded within our Xero platform. And not just that, it's the connection point from the core Xero data to HMRC and then to Companies House as well. Since launching, we've had tons of practices have switched over to Xero Tax, and they've given some really great feedback on it. Available at the moment for our companies, we have the corporation tax and accounts production for both micro entities and small companies. So that's the FRS 105 and FRS 1021A, with the support for those dormant accounts. On top of that, Xero Tax allows for a split accounts and tax production process. So you're able to have one team produce the statutory accounts and then hand off to another to create the tax return. But we've also added a recent addition of a complete split. So you're able to produce the accounts in Xero and then use your other software, if you have it, to produce that tax return, which is a really fantastic level of flexibility. We also have personal tax, which supports those self-assessments alongside the accounts production for sole traders. And continuing with that theme of flexibility, personal tax can even be used for your clients that do not have a Xero subscription. Now, right away, we're going to look at our company accounts, but then we'll come back and look at personal tax just a little bit later on. So let's jump right in and take a look at Xero Tax. So right away, once you are within our Xero UK partner program, and whenever you start to go to try and access tax, you'll always land in our what we call Xero HQ. And that's your practice management tool within Xero that you get for free as being part of our partner program. What you'll see right away here is at the top, we have a banner that allows us to navigate around HQ, where we can enter in things like our clients, any mass reports we want to go through, our staff, even some additional practice options. And then, of course, where we want to go, tax. So we're going to follow across that banner at the top and go over to tax. On that drop down, we can then see that we've got company accounts and tax, our sole trader accounts, and personal tax. So we are going to look at each of these in turn. We're going to start off with the company accounts and tax, though. Once you get through and have started using Xero Tax, you'll see your dashboard. And this is what it will look like once you've started some filings. So right away, we can see I have our name, practice client, and a Xero organization column. That name is linked directly to the company registration number, the CRN. We then have the practice client name. So this is what you've named them within Xero HQ. And then you have the Xero organization column. This is what their Xero organization is called. You then have a few extra columns here for who it might be assigned to currently within the practice, and a few different due dates. But before I jump in and actually start a filing to show you what it will look like, I want to quickly show you some of the settings and the flexibility that's available within Xero Tax. So we're going to go up to the top here and we're going to go to settings. So what you'll see is some of that practice information on the left, but you'll see those all-important practice settings on the right. This is where we have a few different ways that we can begin to customize and change all of the different document generation here. You have some styles, which is where you'll be able to customize things like fonts, cover pages. Now, I'm not going to click into cover pages here because that would spoil the surprise. I actually have a really slick cover page that I'd love to show you at the end. We then have the accountant's report. Now, something that Xero Tax has done here for you is it's actually pre-populated all of the wording for our different accountants reports. So you can, of course, select which one is your default, and that will show up as the default whenever you begin to create any of those accounts. And you do have the ability to either tick or untick this box here that allows that to be overwritten at an individual client basis. Now, I'm going to untick that because I want to set a practice-wide default so that I'm only using this one specific accountant's report wording. And once I'm happy, I can save that down. The next thing that Xero Tax has done here is we have our disclosures. And this is where Xero Tax has pre-populated, again, all of the wording of all of the different disclosures here. And that really starts to save some time. So you don't have to go through and enter in every single disclosure each time. It allows you to save a little bit of that time because all of those have been pre-populated. Now you can, of course, edit these if you want to, but you don't have to. Next to look at is we have our presentation options. Now these are some very important settings, and I'm going to call out a few different things here. So right away, you might see that we've got the ability to, again, allow these settings to be overwritten or to set those practice-wide defaults if we want to. So things like our balance sheet format, or whether we're including a profit and loss, and so on. Now, there's a very important point to call out here. While Xero Tax allows you to create a detailed profit and loss, Xero Tax only files filleted accounts to Companies House. You can create the detailed profit and loss, but it only files filleted. And then there's a few other settings there. A nice one to look at is you have the ability to remove that draft watermark if you want to send it out to a client. Once you're happy again, you press save. Now there's one extra feature that I'm just going to show off within the settings here. And that's the ability to add in a review process to the CT600. So what this does is this allows you to select particular sections of that CT600 that you want to apply an extra level of review and an extra level of scrutiny to. So this means perhaps if you get a junior in the practice to create the accounts for you and the tax return, it means you can go through and review them, means they have to take an extra level of care when filling them out. However, what I'm going to use them for is another great trick, and that's to allow us to go through and really quickly navigate up and around the individual CT600 really quickly. So what you can do is you can start going through the process of actually creating those individual CT600s and then jumping really quickly to the sections you know you're going to want to look at. And so now that you've gone through those settings, that is a one-time thing. You only have to do that once. So what you can then do is, once you've done those practice settings, we can actually jump in and get started with a filing. So I'm going to press New Filing, and I'm going to start searching for my client. So I'm going to start that filing for my client here, Practice Makes Perfect. And what you'll have to do right away is once you have searched for that client and you want to begin the actual filing, you will need to enter in the client's CRN number. So the reason I wasn't asked for this one is because I've filed for this client before. So you'll only have to enter that in once. And then Xero Tax will remember that CRN for you. You can also enter it into your client Xero organization as part of the organization settings so that Xero Tax can then read it directly from the Xero organization. What we're going to do here, we're going to pick the current period. So we're going to go, we're actually going to go and file for 2022. You have the ability to choose what the trading status was, so whether it was dormant or not. And then we can go through and choose that financial reporting standard. So we have 105 or 102.1a, with some quick hot links that take us directly to some .gov sites for that additional support and information. Now, I'm going to go through 102.1a just because it's a little bit beefier, so I can show off a bit more of the product. And then the last thing to look at is that flexed split feature that I mentioned before that allows you to create that CT600 externally using your existing software if you need to. So what we can then do is once we've chosen what we're doing, I'm of course going to create the tax return in Xero. We can then hit next. Now we don't have to worry about that overwriting section. That's because I took a look at this client's information a little bit earlier. And so all I've got to do is overwrite that. You wouldn't be presented with that the first time you go to create a filing. We're then taken to that company information. This is where we can see some of that information that's been pulled down directly from Companies House using that CRN. Once I've reviewed that, I can jump to the next section. And this is where I'm taken to my accounts validation. So the accounts validation is a really key and integral step to the actual production here. And this is where Xero Tax can really begin to show off that it's not just looking at the general ledger here. It's looking at and doing these verifications at a transactional level. So what it will do is each of these verifications, it will look for, of course, it will look for accounts. So in this instance, we can see there that we have a prepayment or an accruals account that it will search for, but it will also look through at a transactional level at perhaps and notify you if perhaps you've got any disallowables that you've used as well. And then something else that Xero Tax can do here is it has the ability to check for a prior period mismatch. So, for example, if the information in Xero does not match the information that was filed at Companies House last year. And the really cool thing there is that actually you don't need to have filed with Xero Tax previously for that to work that way. Next up, we then have the actual iXBRL tagging of the profit and loss and then the balance sheet. So we, of course, have the account, the code, the tag, and then the information for the current and previous period. But a key thing here is that Xero Tax does not require you to use a fixed or a specific kind of chart of account code or format. You can look at any. You can set up and use any chart of account format you like. And then Xero Tax will do its best to go through and tag those accounts for you. But if you go through and notice that one of the accounts is incorrect, you can still change them. And of course, those tags are determined by whether it is you've chosen 102 or 102.1a or 105. And if you change a tag, Xero Tax will remember that for next year when you go to file for this client again. Next up, we then have our balance sheet, same kind of layout, the account, the code, the tag, and the information for the current or previous period. Now, there is a really great little notification at the top there, and that's one that lets us know that we don't need to change the tag of an account if the balance is negative. So an example there is, of course, if we've got a negative asset, we don't need to change that to a liability. Xero Tax is going to do that for us. Then once we're happy with that balance sheet, we scroll through, check what we're looking at. We are going to go next up, and that takes us to the notes to the accounts and those additional statements. Now, the first thing that's popped up there is a quick note for the asset disclosures. Now, this is because Xero Tax has identified that in my profit and loss, I used some depreciation expense tags. So what it's done is it's asking me, do I want to add any of that information into my PPE note? In this instance, I'm not going to, because I'm going to untick my PPE note because we don't need to look at it. So, but of course, if you were going through this, you might click yes. So We're then presented with our balance sheet statements, our standard compliance and transition, any of those accounting policies that we've gone through. Now, what we can do with these is we do actually have the ability to go through and customize these and edit any of that information. But again, Xero Tax has done most of that work to fill them out for you. And then we get onto the actual notes to the financial statements. So some of these have a lot more detail than others, some don't. For example, we have that PPE note that has that extra level of detail behind it. We don't need to look at that for today, though. And then if we keep scrolling all the way down to the bottom, because we're on 1021A, we have the ability to look at and add in that statement of changes in equity. But once we're happy, we'll keep clicking forward. Now we're on to the signing for directors and the accountant details. Now, a great little feature within Xero Tax here is that actually it allows you to sign on behalf of up to 3 different directors. So you're not restricted to just one. And then, of course, we'll see the various different accountant name and details and the practice names. And what you can do here is this is where we can actually go into a specific split workflow. So this isn't the same as that total split workflow that allows you to create the tax return outside of Xero. This is perhaps if you're in a much larger practice, you might have one team that's going to create the statutory accounts and then another that's going to go through and create that tax return. Or alternatively, you might be a sole practitioner, so you do the whole thing yourself, which is where you'd be able to go through and just hit continue to tax return there. And then that's going to take us on to our extra information about the tax return. Now, before we go any further here, this is a great point to just show something we call the jump to feature. And this allows you to really quickly jump backwards and forwards between the sections of the accounts that you've already begun to produce. And it also allows you to see ahead of what you've done. So I can see here that at the moment I've only got my capital allowances in the information and the tax return to look at. But if I close that out, we can look at my information now. So the first one that's always ticked is going to be our capital allowances because it's the most commonly used. But then we also have the CT 600, A, L, and C that we can add. So for those loans, the RDEC, and of course, whether we're claiming or surrendering group relief. And if I now click that jump to button, we'll see that I've added in those extra items for that director's loans, the R&D, and the group and consortium relief. But I am just going to untick these 3 here because we don't need to look at those in so much detail today. Moving on, I'll go into my capital allowances now. So Xero Tax takes the information directly out of the Xero fixed asset register. So we're able to enter in all of the fixed assets our client has in Xero, and then it will all be pulled directly into Xero Tax for us, which then means we don't have to worry about entering all of that in manually each time. So right away, we can see here, I have my 2 assets. I have my Tesla, environmentally friendly vehicle. So because that is an environmentally friendly vehicle, I'm able to claim the full first year allowance on it. And what you'll also notice there is actually, I also have the ability to go through and apply the 130% super deduction if I wanted to. We're just going to leave it as standard for now. Then the next asset we have is a widget machine, which I'm just going to claim the full 10,000 AIA. And as we're doing that, you'll see that this information has adjusted on the bottom right here. Then if we scroll further down, I have my additional pools that I can look at. But then all the way at the bottom, I have the hot links to any of the actual other allowances. So I can get some more information here. Things like my AIA, FYA, and so on. Then once we're happy with our allowances there, I can click forwards, and that takes me directly onto my company tax return, that's CT 600. So on the left-hand side, we can see all the different sections of the tax return, company information, turnover, so on, and they're all hyperlinks that allow us to quickly navigate around the actual return. On the right-hand side, we will, of course, see the actual core of it, the actual information that we need to fill out and enter in for the CT 600. But something you might notice on the left-hand side is most of those dots next to the sections are blue, bar the top one, which is white. And that's because right at the beginning, when we looked at our settings, we selected different sections that needed to be reviewed, and the sections that need to be reviewed will be white until it has been reviewed. The first time you ever file for a client, you will need to enter in their UTR. But once you've done it once, Xero Tax will remember it each year afterwards for you. And then once you make any edits on here, you will see that it goes yellow to let you know that it has been edited. But once I'm happy with that particular section, I can mark that as reviewed. And then now that I've marked it as reviewed, you'll notice that that dot has gone green because it's now been reviewed. Fantastic. What I can then do is I could scroll the whole way through my CT 600 now and work through all the sections I need to go through. Or if I know that I only need to quickly check on a few different sections, I can use that arrow to go to the next one that requires review. So this is taking me to the turnover, where I can scroll through this, decide I'm happy, mark it as reviewed again, it goes green, and I go to the next section for review. Then taken on to my disallowable costs. And then something else I can look at within my disallowable costs, and a lot of the other actual sections of the CT 600 here, is they have the option to add in a backing schedule, which allows us to put in extra bits of information to then have that all calculate within the CT 600. So here, if I tick to enable that backing schedule and then press edit, this is going to give me the option to add in different entries for my provisions, for example. So I could go through here and maybe I'm going to put in something like a general bad debt provision or a pension provision. I'm not going to here just for the sake of the product demo, but it's just to show you that you have the ability to add that extra backing information in. Again, mark that as reviewed and jump to the next section. In this instance, it's another one that has that backing schedule enabled. Mark that as reviewed and keep going. What we can then do there is we keep quickly navigating through our CT 600, checking the things we need to check, mark them as reviewed, and move on until eventually we're taken to that declaration. Now, you always have to fill out the declaration. So in this instance, let's go, it's me, who I am, mark that as reviewed, and then jump to the next section. And we get that pop up there to let us know that all sections have now been reviewed. Amazing. What I can do there then is press generate. And right away, what Xero Tax has done there is let me know that actually I have some charitable donations in a particular box, but I haven't actually entered anything into the qualifying donations. So what I can do here is I can just return to the tax return, scroll down to where I can finally see a little red dot or warning to let me know exactly what I need to, where I need to enter something in, and I can press generate again. Xero Tax is then going through the process of generating both the accounts and that tax return. And once I get that notification to say they've been generated correctly, I can scroll down and I can see I've got both my sets of documents that have been generated. And now I can go through the process of reviewing them. Or perhaps if I was someone who was a junior in the practice, I'd pass them off to somebody else to review for me. So if I go through that review process, I press final review, I get a quick banner at the top to let me know what's not going to be included because Xero Tax only files filleted. And then I can see the accounts that I need to review. Now, right away, we get that slick cover page that I was talking about earlier, my cover page that I'm really quite pleased with. And then we get to go through and see the actual accounts we have available here. So of course, we'll see our directors report with both the signing directors that I requested. We're going to see my accountant's report with the specific wording I've chosen. And we can scroll the whole way through, of course. But if I just go to mark the accounts as reviewed, I'm then at this point where it changes to reviewed, and I then have the ability to actually go through and submit. Now, of course, I then do that for the corporation tax return as well, but something else I can do here is I have the ability to use this post-tax feature. What this does is where Xero Tax will create a balancing journal for me so that I can then hit post, and that's going to get fed directly back into my client's Xero organization, all ready and done for me. So that's the end-to-end of the company accounts production, but we've still got more to look at. So as with company accounts and the corporation tax, personal tax is a true cloud-based accounts and tax solution built for accountants and bookkeepers. So with us also having personal tax, your practice can use Xero Tax for both your individuals and your company clients, enhancing Xero's vision and commitment to tax and compliance in the UK. Now I'm just going to highlight a few things that we can do within personal tax. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few items I'd really like to mention. So there is, of course, the ability to go through and enter in SA 102, that employment schedule, so for your client's employment. The SA 103 to enter in self-employment, which you can do either manually or import into personal tax if they're using Xero. A very recent addition is our SA 104 for partnership income, which is not the same as a partnership return. But what SA 104 does is allows a partner within a partnership to disclose their individual income as part of the personal tax return. And then a really cool one there is we have the SA 108 for capital gains summary tax, for when your clients have any of those capital gains to declare. It's just a few of the possibilities within personal tax. We're going to take a look at all the other ones available, just so you can see them. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. Personal tax can do so much more. So let's go take a look at it. Now, of course, we are right back here in my company accounts, but we're going to jump over into personal tax now. So from within our HQ, we're just going to go straight back to tax and then personal tax. This is where we're going to land on our personal tax dashboard, where we're going to see all the various different clients' returns in the various different stages of complete. So I've got things like their name, the reference, the status, and so on. And what I can do is I do have the ability to search for any. I could start a new tax return, but there's a really great feature that I'd love to show here, and that's the ability to manage the practice gateway IDs. So this is where personal tax stores those government gateway IDs, so you don't have to enter them in every single time, really saving you a load of time there. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to work through a set of accounts that I've previously started for a client of mine. Just as a disclosure there, she is, of course, not a real client, but we're just going to keep going through. We're going to be working with my client here, Christine Spencer. So if I press resume, it's going to take me into her return that I've already started. So right away, we're taken over to our summary page of that return, where right at the top, we'll see a few important things here. We've got our total tax and NIC due. This figure will update automatically as we add in different levels of data and different income streams. On the right-hand side, we've got those computations that will take into account any of the payments made in the year. We can see what status it's in, and we've got a really great history for that audit trail. But then over on the left-hand side, we have all the different sections of the actual return here. We've got those client details. So these client details are fed directly through from the client profile in HQ. So if we want to change them, we'll have to edit them in HQ, as for example. We've then got all the way down at the bottom, a very important one here. We, of course, have that taxpayer status, whether they're rest of the UK, Welsh, or Scottish. And now we can navigate through this return by using these links up and down the left-hand side. Or we can use the quick hot link we have at the bottom of each page once we're done going through it. So next up, we have those front page details. And move on to the other return information. So all kinds of things like whether we want to claim a repayment. And again, that information will be pulled directly from that client record in HQ. Perhaps any of the signatory details. We can then move on to our tax and PAYE coding adjustments. Any of those payments on account. So anything entered here will be shown in those computations on the front page. And then we have those additional notes, any attachments. And then the last thing to look at is our computation report. Now, I'm not going to look at that computation report just yet because it's going to be totally empty. We're going to take a look at it once it's got some of that extra information filled into it. You then have the ability to add in all these new and different kind of schedules. So these are all of the various different things that personal tax can help you enter in and has a section for. So again, that list that I showed was not an exhaustive list, it's just a few of them. But then the eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that on the left-hand side there, underneath the new schedules, I actually already have 3 schedules enabled. And that's because personal tax has remembered from when I did this filing for Christine last year. And it said, right, you used those schedules, let's bring them back in. So it save you time because you used them last year. So it's remembered for us. The first thing we're going to want to do here is we're actually going to go through, I'm going to add in a couple different sets of information and income streams just so we can see how that tax updates and how it works for us. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a new schedule, and it's going to be for employment and lump sums. So my client Christine here, she's got a full-time job as well as working with her own businesses, and she should actually also be taking a pension. But we're going to be going through, we're going to add in a new employment and add in that new item. So Christine here, she works with me here at Xero. So we're going to fill out some of that employment information. Now I'm going to deliberately leave that PAYE reference blank so I can show you a feature within Xero a bit later. We're going to go down, we're going to enter in Christine's pay, the tax taken off, and you'll notice that this is automatically updating. And of course, we need to enter in that upper earnings limit. And as we've done that, that tax is updated at the top. And we have the ability to keep going through and adding in some of that extra information. So things like perhaps benefits or expenses. And we can see that we have any of those foreign earning deductions. And something you might notice here is there's no save button at the bottom of each page because you don't need to keep pressing save. personal tax saves automatically for you. And it's really simple to add in another employment item. Let's say if your client happens to have multiple jobs. A great example of that is actually my father-in-law. He's supposed to be retired, but he's actually got two different jobs on the side because he absolutely just can't sit still. So of course, for that personal tax return, we have to make sure that we've got all that filled out for him. But then after we've done that, we have the ability to go through and add in other levels of information. So perhaps I want to go down and use one of the schedules that personal tax has remembered for me. So I can go through and use that schedule for the gifts to charities. Add in something from last year, perhaps, so it's remembered which charity, and I can pop in that my client here has made another payment to that charity. The next thing we can go through and take a look at then is going to be our actual self-employment here. So if I click into that, we can see that actually this is a schedule that's been remembered for me. And that's because this was one that I filed for last year. However, it's only personal tax has only remembered a few different details for me. It's just remembered the business detail, the business name and details, for example. And what you'll see is that this is actually completely empty, because this is where I can really shout out about it. Personal tax does not require your client to be using a Xero organization. You can enter in all of this information for their self-employment, those sole traders, manually. They don't have to be using Xero. All you do, set them up with a client record, and then you can use personal tax. They don't need an organization. They don't need any additional fees. However, if they do have a Xero organization, you can really begin to reap the rewards of being able to import that information across. Before you can import the information across, though, you do have to have generated the sole trader accounts. So if I just jump from tax to sole trader accounts here, in classic Blue Peter style, I have actually produced these already. But I can show here that those sole trader accounts do in fact look very similar to the company accounts that we just looked at. And that's just because it's built on a similar platform, but it's much more simplified. So we can see here that I've produced those sole trader accounts for Christine here, and I've got them reviewed and approved. So all I need to do is head back into personal tax, head back into Christine's return here, jump down to the self-employment schedule, and then I can use that feature to import it in. Once it loads across, give it a second there. Let's just drop that a quick refresh, make sure that internet hasn't given up on us. There we go. So all we have to do, press import, and we can bring in that information from the sole trader accounts. And you'll see right away that tax is updated at the top. But then we can also scroll through and see all of the figures have updated and come through. But that doesn't mean we're no longer able to edit them. So for example, I could still go through here and I can still add in additional disallowables. I can still check through any of those capital allowances, any of those adjustments. I can enter in the basis periods. Now, of course, that is an important thing going forwards. We have the ability to then also go through, add in any of the perhaps CIS, and then anything else important from the balance sheet. But then once we're happy with all of that, we can start moving on to the next sections. So I just really quickly want to show off a couple of the other schedules that we can look at here. So I'm just going to click in and add and show you the 104 partnership income. We're not going to go through the whole thing because it is quite a long part of the self-assessment here, but it's where you can add in those extra details of the partnership income. You've then, of course, got the ability to add in the capital gains. Now, I am just deleting the partnership return because it will throw out an error if I leave that in with a blank partnership number. And then you've got those 108, those capital gains. Just trying to show off those extra sections that I mentioned before. But again, not an exhaustive list. Personal tax can do so much more. But then once you've gone through and added in things like the employment, the self-employment, you might want to start reviewing a few of the different sections. So personal tax has this great tool called the review tools, which allows you to compare the current versus the previous year. And that allows you to get some really great context of what's been going on. So if I activate that and go back to my self-employment here, I can see that I've got last year's profit versus this year's. So we can see there that Christine's business here, it's growing, got some additional profit, looking good. Now you can activate the review tools at the end of the generation to go back through and review it, or you can leave them active while you go through and create it from scratch. So if I go back to my very last remembered schedule, the interest, I can see here that I entered something for last year, but nothing for this year. So of course, that means I can go through and enter in this year's figures as well. Fantastic. So once you're happy with that, we of course can exit off the review tools, but it allows you to get that really great level of insight and context. The last thing then to do is to use our validate tool. And what this does is this effectively will gives it a quick check through to see if anything might get kicked out as an error from HMRC. So anytime the tax return is in draft, it allows you to highlight any potential errors. And you'll see right away, we've got that one I mentioned before. So it's identified that blank PAYE reference I left. So if I click on that, it's going to ask me to enter that in. So I'm going to enter in that figure and press validate again. It is that when it then says no errors were found. Amazing. So what I can do from there is I can set that up as ready for review it, get that sent off to the client, and then submitted. Now, this is a great time to mention one thing here. So within personal tax, there is no built-in feature to be able to request online signatures. But we do have a fantastic additional add-on called document packs that allows you to get a online secure e-signature from your clients using Adobe Acrobat Sign, and that will work for both personal tax and the company accounts. But now we've actually gotten to that point of it's reviewed and we're sending it off to our client. If I press print, we can look at a few different reports here. So I am going to untick the SA100 because we don't need to look through that, and the schedule of data. But I am going to call out what that schedule of data is. So that schedule of data is every single change that has happened within any of the schedules in a nice, quick to look at report. But if I just select these last two and I press download, it's going to open those up so that I can take a quick look at them. Now, these are fantastic reports to send off to your clients because, for example, this one here will show us a full breakdown of the tax and the NIC. And then the one below it is going to be that payments report and all of those computations. And what you'll notice is each of these reports has an IR mark. That is that individual mark that is unique and is going to match up to the submission to HMRC. So you can even match up your reports to your submission. And then once we're at the point there, we want to go through and actually submit that. Xero will then show that notification for the accepted return in the history section. If HMRC has not accepted the return, you can click into the notification and find out why. And back on the dashboard, you'll then see the notification on there that it's been accepted by HMRC. So once you file the tax return with HMRC, you're able to amend it to deal with any of those corrections or omissions. The amendment does then create another return. To do that, you'll want to open the return back up, go to that overflow menu, click amend, and it'll create a new return and that amendment. And then you submit that the same way as you did before. You can then view that original submission on the dashboard together with the separate amendment, and you can file multiple amendments as indicated by the number alongside the amendment. And then that XML file also contains the information to indicate that it is an amended return. But now, I can't talk about self-assessment with at least mentioning MTD and income tax self-assessment, or ITSA as it's known. So personal tax is one half of our solution for self-assessment. The other is our MTD for ITSA tool that's available, that will be available on all Xero editions. This is where we're going to be able to provide you that support with Xero to use personal tax for those self-assessments for your clients that don't reach that ITSA threshold. And then of course you'll have ITSA for anyone over that £50,000 limit. And of course, if you'd like to know more about Xero's MTD for ITSA tool, feel free to reach out to our Xero team, one of our account managers or partner consultants, and they'll be able to show you it and tell you more. So there we have it. Xero Tax, a seamless end-to-end accounts production software built to save time, reduce errors, and cut costs within a single Xero platform. But that's not it for Xero Tax. Our team is dedicated to pushing forwards with development and growth. So here's a quick look at our Xero Tax roadmap. Now, I'm not going to talk through every single thing on there, but I'm just going to highlight a few things here. That's additional information to the CT600L, extra personal tax support on things like the SA 106 and the 107. And then the most exciting one is that one at the very end. That's our unified tax view. That's to be able to see and manage any of those obligations and due dates across all tax types. And then so before I get ready to some of those questions, I'm just going to go for a couple next steps here. If you're interested in Xero Tax and you want to know more, sign up for our partner program. Xero Tax is a free benefit to anyone on our UK partner program. If you then want to know more about Xero, we have some fantastic sessions to get certified for Xero. And then that allows you to earn some rewards within Xero and start growing your practice and your clients through our own advisor directory. And so before I just get on to the questions, I'd just like to say a huge thank you for joining me and thank you for taking the time to come along to this session. And maybe perhaps I'll see you in the future on some more content. So I'm just going to close that off and try and answer some of the questions that we've got in the box here. So I do only have two questions that I can see there. So one of them has someone's asked, in the settings, can you change the reporting standards after the accounts are prepared? So i.e. from 102, 1A to 105. No, you aren't able to change it mid-production, but it is quite easy to restart it. You just press new filing and then you'd open up that as a brand new one and you change the reporting standard. There's another one that said, when will Xero Personal Tax be able to pull that employment info from HMRC via the agent authorization like other softwares? So it's on the roadmap and it is coming very soon, but I can't give a definitive timeline on when it's going to be able to pull that through. But it is something our team is actively working on to be able to pull all of that information down from HMRC. There's another question come through that's saying, when will partnership accounts be able to be produced? Again, that's something that is being actively worked on, but I can't give a definitive timeline on it. But it is something that is on our roadmap and it is being produced. Now, I am going to just pause for just a second or two. If anyone else has any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. So I'll just wait a couple of seconds or two just to let some of those questions roll in if perhaps you're typing. So there's another one come through, and it's will you produce accounts for charities? So that is on the roadmap, but it's not an urgent one. There are some workarounds you can do within Xero Tax already for that, but it is something that will be produced, but it's not as quite as being actively worked on as some of the others. Okay. There's another one there. Will there be the ability to download personal tax reports into Excel format? So that isn't something that is being planned, but what you can do is if you raise a ticket with our support team, we can actually take that down as feedback, and I can actually take that down as feedback from this session today as well. But that looks like that takes us to the end of the questions and getting close to the time there. So I just again want to say thank you so much for coming along to this session. And I really, really hope you're able to take something away from it, and maybe I'll see you in the future. And I'll just hand back to Ryan for the outro. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, I'll keep very brief. No, thank you so much, Sam. It's such informative and interesting presentation. And thank you everyone who gave up your time this afternoon, gave up your sort of lunch breaks. So we hope you've come away from this webinar having seen plenty of opportunities to save valuable time in future.